Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Play with AK featuring me, your host Akukami. In this StarCraft episode we'll be taking a look at a game I played on ladder. This is going to be a TvP matchup on Daybreak. I was about to say Metropolis as I just casted a game from there. Anyways, going to be spawning in the 7 o'clock position, spawning as the blue Terran player. Meanwhile, my opponent, mondocane, has spawned as the red Protoss player in the 1 o'clock position. This is one of the new ladder season 7 maps, and I actually had this vetoed at one point until recently when I decided to try this map out, because I've seen a lot of pro replays on this map and I think this map is just cool in general. So I decided to uncheck that off my list, and here I am playing games on there. Anyways, this is a little bit of a long game and I don't think I'll be able to fit this into a 15-minute span or 10-minute span, excuse me, as I was planning to do. So let's speed through this a little bit. There are a lot of waiting times in this game and a lot of macroing periods, a lot of periods where neither of us are doing anything, and I'm just going to go through that quickly. Coming out with my 10 supply depot followed by my 10 racks and my 13 refinery, going for that standard Terran opening. Meanwhile, my opponent has gone for his gateway, his pylon, gateway, gas, and another pylon. My opponent's scouting me out in this location here. Well, there are only 2 scouting locations here, so he knows where I am. Not being able to get into my base, taking one shot at my building supply depot and moving out before my marine is there to greet it with some artillery fire. Coming out with my factory here, as you can tell, probably going for some early teching, beginning my journey up that tech tree. Meanwhile, my opponent coming out with a forge here and a cybernetics core, going to be researching that warp gate. Meanwhile, my opponent is actually putting a pylon down here for some scouting and to deny any early third base, as I will have to shoot that pylon down before I can actually move any base in there. Meanwhile, moving out with my own scout, my scouting SUV, going to be moving into my base. My opponent's base, scouting out what he has with a gateway, and he won't be getting away from this stalker. Nope. Anyways, shooting that down. Coming out with his second and third gateway. Meanwhile, chrono boosting. Excuse me, not chrono boosting. Coming out with that ground armor level 1, following up with a second forge, robotics facility, and another gateway. Meanwhile, my opponent's probe is just hanging out right there, and yes, I'm going for cloak banshees, as you can see here, following that up with my second command center, and going to be slowing this down a little bit. My opponent has come out with another pylon here to block off any other expansions that I may take in the future, hanging out with this probe here. Meanwhile, back at my base, going to be actually, I think my first banshee did already spawn. Yes, it already spawned and is now shooting down this pylon that my opponent placed there. And as you can tell, I had actually, what happened here, I had a my racks here, built this tech lab and put down my factory on it, building my second factory, and I think just by doing that you already know what's coming. Yes, this is going to be a TvP game where I go mech. I don't normally go mech, but I just wanted to try it out for myself, as it is a hotly debated build at the moment in TvP, going mech. Coming in with my Banshee, not being able to do that harass as stalkers are waiting there and observer waiting there, and going to be swapping out my factory onto my tech lab with my starport, as I realized that I will not be able to do any harass with my Banshees, as they're actually too late, as my opponent has detection and observers in play. Meanwhile, moving out with my my orbital there, building a command center right behind that, moving to saturated, and coming out with my first Thor and vehicle plating level 1. Moving my Banshee here, and my Hellion right here, and another Banshee here, trying to look for any hidden expansions, and just basically moving into good locations where I can harass later on when my opponent is distracted. Going to be taking my third and fourth gas here as I try to pump out my my mech army. Meanwhile, back in my base, coming down with a third factory, and changing my third command center into an orbital. And let's slow this down a little bit. Coming out with a second forge, going for that ground weapons upgrade level 2, as my opponent is ready for any Banshee harass, and my Banshee is still hanging out over there. Coming out with a warp prism, going to be doing some harass in the back of my base, or planning to do some harass in the back of my base. Meanwhile, coming out with his own expansion. Do I spot this? Nope, don't spot it yet. My opponent takes out my scouting Hellion that was here, and just moving closer to the front of my base. Meanwhile, back at my base, this is one of the problems of mech in TvP. If your opponent forces early aggression on you and you don't have enough units, you are going to get crushed. And what I should have done actually was place a bunker here, here, and here, maybe 3 bunker defense, and start producing marines like crazy. Meanwhile, my opponent comes in with his warp prism, warping in some zealots who are now 2-2, not having anything to defend with, and having to move my SCVs out of the way. Coming out with one of my Thors just to deal with this harassment, and back at my opponent's base, not doing much of anything behind that. Should probably be expanding or something, or building more units. Anyways, my opponent is coming out with some more zealots to deal with this aggression, deciding not to, and as I produce a Viking to take care of this warp prism, and yeah, that's taken care of. Meanwhile, back in my base, producing SCVs to replenish what was here, but not really going to be helpful because there's nothing to mine from here, really. Not really realizing that at the moment. Meanwhile, this is one of those slow periods, so I'll be speeding things up, moving to do some harass here, shooting down some probes, moving away as there is a photon cannon here, so it can see my cloaked Banshee. Meanwhile, my opponent is moving his forces to this watchtower, probably going to be doing a push sometime in the future. Idle probes for him as he tries to saturate this base. Where is my other Banshee? Did it get shot down? Well, oh no, here's my second Banshee. Coming out with my cloak Banshee and doing some harass in his base as my opponent is gearing up to move forward. Meanwhile, not doing anything with this Banshee. I should be doing something with that Banshee. My opponent's come out with his second warp prism as I move my third base over here to this location, expand here, forgetting to put gas and remembering to put gas right now. We're to be saturating that soon. Meanwhile, my opponent getting an idea of what I have here. I believe he scouted. Yes, getting an idea of what I have at my base, seeing that I do have defenses right there. Meanwhile, doing some harass, going for that Twilight Council. Probably will not be getting it as the photon cannon is here, choosing to move back. Just doing a lot of harass with my Banshees. My Banshee came in, did some harass here, and moved back out. In and out, in and out. Anyways, my Thors are now 01 and have that armor upgrade, coming out with that level 2 armor upgrade. We'll be expanding to this location here as I realize I'm running short on gas and my army isn't as big as I would like it to be because of that. My opponent's scouting out with that observer. My mech army in the front of my base brings where are the immortals? Anyways, going to be moving my scouting racks out, going to be posting it in this location to scout for any more warp prism drops. As I say that, one happens and actually does a significant damage to my base here, taking out my one refinery as I move 3 of my Thors back to deal with this. Should have been more wary of that. Well, I'll take that look at that then. Future games. Anyways, talking to myself a bit there. Coming out with plasma shield upgrades now as and here is a big engagement. All my Hellions get trapped, but my Thors are left in the back. I decide to engage this and trying to come out with my repairing SCVs who are getting blocked because my Thors are so big, but it doesn't matter anyways because I'm pushing my opponent back. And as you can see here, as I slow things down a bit, pushing him all the way back to his base, realizing that he doesn't have any reinforcements at the front of his base, I decide to move out. And as you can see here, I forgot to check this out. I'm sorry. having 7 factories with tech labs and 1 with a reactor to build those Hellions, taking out these destructible rocks here. Going to be scanning at the front of his base, checking for any reinforcements and his unit composition. Finally come out with those 3-3 immortals, 3-3-1, I guess, 3-3-1 immortals. Meanwhile, moving out with all of my forces to the front of his base, as I think at this time I was thinking he was only on 2 bases, which is why I don't scout out anymore. Just saturating my 3rd expansion now, my 4th base, constantly checking for my opponent's army composition. And yeah, my opponent not expanding anymore, realizing that he's probably in trouble as I have the front of his base blocked off, moving all of his probes here, and there's nothing here to mine. My opponent is hurting for minerals at the moment, and with all of these upgrades, he decides to go for it and engages my mech army, and watch as my mech army just destroys all of his forces. And that's game for him. In my version of TvP Mech, I tried to open with Cloak Banshees in hopes of doing some economic harass and severely cripple my opponent's economy. However, my opponent was ready for me, as you can see here with his observer, and drove my Cloak Banshee away. One of the biggest issues I found when playing mech with TvP, or actually mech in any matchup, is that the build is extremely gas heavy, especially when going for fast Thors. Now, as you can see here, I didn't really have too many Thors out by the time my opponent was ready to start attacking me, and as you can see here, my defenses were really weak and I didn't have too much of my mech army ready to go and defend my base in case my opponent decided to push out against me. Fortunately for me, my opponent did not have the correct mix of units to deal with my mech army, and because of this I was able to win this first engagement because he just simply wasn't prepared. He destroyed all of my Hellions, but I was able to move out with my Thors right behind it and re-engage his army and just basically destroy whatever he had. My SCVs were not able to fully repair my Thors, and I probably lost quite more than I should have in this engagement, but this first engagement did not go well for him and I was able to push back his aggression. Well everyone, that about wraps it up for this game. If you like my content and videos, please subscribe to my channel, thumbs up and like this video, and as always, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in another episode of Let's Play with AK.